A warm welcome to the Uxbridge FM History Show, and we're very pleased to welcome back local historian and chairman of the Uxbridge Local History Society, Ken Pearce. Hi Ken, how are you today?
A bit hot, thank you very much, but otherwise very well.
Yes, if you're playing this back in the future, we recorded this on August the 12th. It's very, very hot, 30 degrees or something, ridiculously hot. So, the first story we're going to hear about today, I believe, is 3 Uxbridge characters.
Yes, indeed. Well, I love hearing about eccentric people who don't necessarily conform to the usual standards of life and behaviour. And their lives are very often quite crazy, but fascinating. So today I've picked 3 Uxbridge characters from the past who are still remembered today. And the first is George Case, C-A-S-E, although he was known to everybody in the town as Nobby Casey. Nobby was born in London in 1812, but was brought to Uxbridge as an infant to live with his grandmother. And after she died, he lived alone in a tenement building in the Lynch, and apparently in near squalor. He went about wearing tattered clothes and a battered top hat, usually with a clay pipe crosswise in his mouth, holding it rather like a horse's bit. He was, in fact, sometimes teased and abused by young men, all because of his unusual appearance and behaviour. Nobby never had a proper job, but he earned money by various means. He ran errands for local traders, and using a yoke and 2 pails, carried water from the river to local washerwomen. Just a reminder, there was no mains water in those days, and if you didn't have a well or a pump, you got your water from the local river. Nobby had a good singing voice, and friends sometimes took him to the Falcon public house to sing for them. And apparently his rendering of the Lass of Richmond Hill was one of their favourites and earned him a reward. The Falcon public house, by the way, is now the Nonna Rosa restaurant. But what made Nobby really remarkable was his outstanding memory. He knew the birthdays of many local people, and on their birthday, he would go and call on them at their house and wish them a happy birthday, and he usually got a coin or a snack as a result. He knew the Anglican prayer book by heart, and so on Sundays, he would wait outside Hillingdon Church, and when the congregation came out from morning service, he could tell them which psalms they had sung, and indeed recite those psalms by heart. And once again, he received a sum of money. Another scheme was to stand at the gate of the houses of rich people, so that when their carriage arrived, he would step forward and open the gate, and a tip was usually forthcoming. One morning in 1887, he was standing outside Lord Hillingdon's house in Vine Lane when he collapsed. He was carried into the gatehouse, but sadly passed away. Our local memory man had breathed his last. My second character is someone I know little about, not even his name. But I was told this story about 60 years ago by a man who worked in the offices of Woodbridge and Son, at that time the most prominent solicitors in Uxbridge. The character in question was known to everybody as Dukey, a nickname he acquired because apparently he had a very large nose like the Duke of Wellington. Dukey, like Nobby Casey, never had a real job, but he relied on running errands for local traders for his income. So one morning he entered the offices of Woodbridge's and said, "Any jobs for me today?" "Yes, Dukey," they said, "we've got a letter to be delivered to Harefield. Will you take it for us?" Well, he said, how much are you going to give me for doing that? 6pence, they replied. Oh, no, I want more than that, he said, turned on his heel and walked out. A few hours later, he reappeared. Have you still got that letter for Harefield, he said. Yes, Dukey, we have, they said. All right, I'll take it, he said. But whatever has made you change your mind? Well, he said, I've just walked to Harefield and back, and I think it's worth 6pence. Character number 3 is Stephen Springall, Springall. Born in Ivor in 1852, he spent much of his career as a butler and valet to wealthy families in London. But eventually, he and his wife settled in a terraced cottage in Villiers Street here in Uxbridge. And Stephen landed the job as steward to a social club, which was then functioning in Belmont Road. But in his spare time, he began to walk the footpaths of West Middlesex and Buckinghamshire. And in time, he knew them all very well. He realised that some of the paths were neglected and overgrown, so he always carried a billhook with him to clear the way. In some cases, he knew that the landowners and farmers were deliberately letting the paths get overgrown to deter people from walking on their land, and sometimes they even put gates across the paths. He always notified the local councils if public footpaths had been illegally closed. In fact, he became known as the footpath champion and worked closely with the Footpath Preservation Association. There were occasions when he would deliberately leave a gate open, and farmers were furious when their animals escaped and then had to be rounded up. And on at least one occasion, a group of them met outside his house and gave him rough music. Now, that was a sign of their disapproval of his behaviour and consisted of banging pots and pans and anything else that would make a big and frightening noise. This is the only instance of rough music that I have come across in our area, but in the past, it was quite common up and down the country. Today, I suppose, you would put something unpleasant through the letterbox. Springall wrote a number of pamphlets, including The Mystery of Black Park, and also an illustrated book entitled Country Rambles Round Uxbridge in 1908. He lived near a large building that had at one time been a militia barracks, and in one of the small rooms he mounted an exhibition of items he had collected during his rambles. He called it, rather grandly, the Thomas Gray Museum, since he was a great admirer of the poet. Gray, of course, the author of Elegy in a Country Churchyard, is buried at Stoke Poges, one of Stephen's favourite haunts. Stephen Springall died in 1933, aged 81, and must be remembered as an early conservationist. And today, his pioneering work on footpath preservation and country walks is still remembered at the visitor centre in the Colne Valley Regional Park. Because, believe it or not, it's still possible today to follow the paths that Stephen Springall took years ago.
Wow. Thanks, Ken, for telling us about Nobby Casey, Dukey and Stephen Springall. I think I might have heard some rough music on the radio recently. I don't know about you. Some pots and pans, maybe?
Right.
Right. Stay tuned. We've got more coming up shortly.